Yes.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 561st Board Meeting of the California Regional Water Quality Control Board, Central Valley Region. I'd like to introduce the board members and staff at this time. On my far left is Raji Barr of Bakersfield. Sitting next to Raji is Carmen Ramirez of Atwater. And sitting on my left, your right, is Mark Bradford of Sacramento. On my far right is Dan Markham. Excuse me, Dan. I renamed you, Dan. Dan Markham of Fall River Mills. And sitting next to Dan is Bob Schneider of Davis. And on my immediate right is Denise Cadera, the vice chair, who hails from Allensworth. My name is Carl Longley, and I come from the grand and glorious city of Fresno. It's glorious sometimes. In the audience is State Board Member Dudek, and we look forward to hearing a little bit more from Tam very shortly. I'll now introduce the Executive Officer who will introduce his staff. Patrick?
Good morning. My name is Patrick Palupa, Executive Officer of the Central Valley Water Board. I apologize for any lack of sleep I may be exhibiting. As you know, we've got a new addition to the household. I will thank the folks who are surrounding me today for picking up the slack while I took a few weeks of paternity leave. And chief among those is Adam Lapitz to my immediate left, who did quite a bit of work filling in as executive officer, and Andrew Altavote sitting across from me, another assistant executive officer in the Rancho Cordova office. The two of them picked up a lot of slack while I was out of the office. And in addition, Clint Snyder, assistant executive officer in the Reading office, and Clay Rogers, assistant executive officer in the Fresno office, both sitting in the audience, picked up a heck of a lot of work while I was out of the office. And I really have to thank them. If you look at the February board meeting agenda, it is packed full. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made. I could only check in relatively infrequently. And again, thanks to all those folks for stepping up. In addition, I have Jessica Yar to my immediate right, counsel from the Office of Chief Counsel and the board's senior attorney. Across from me, sitting next to Andrew Altavote, is David Lancaster, another attorney with the Office of Chief Counsel, and Bailey Toft Dupuis to Jessica's right, the third regional board attorney. To Adam's immediate left is Kieran Lanfranchi Rizzardi, my executive assistant and clerk to the board. And to her left, I want to welcome Shirley Garcia from the Fresno office. She's a newly hired AGPA who Clay has been raving about and who is helping with the administrative functions down there. She's visiting to help see what the board meetings are like, because the next board meeting will be down in Fresno in April. I would also, I believe she's in the audience, or perhaps not, but I would also like to announce that, there she is, if you could stand up, please. Kelly Garver has been hired as the administrative officer for the Central Valley Water Board. She will be replacing Linda Bracamonte coming into that position. We had an exhaustive search with a tremendous amount of folks submitting applications for that position, a very, very well qualified candidate pool. Kelly has been acting as an SSM1, the position beneath Linda Bracamonte, for about a year and a half, and she truly excelled and shone above all the other candidates, and we're very, very happy to give her the promotion into Linda's position, basically running a lot of the administrative functions, certainly in the Rancho Cordova office, but also in the other offices as well. And that concludes the, absolutely. And with that, I will turn it back to the board for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you very much. Mark, would you please lead us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 2, in order to conduct our regional board meetings in a fair and efficient manner, we will be proceeding in accordance with the meeting procedures that have been provided with a summary agenda and are available here at the staff table. They're also available upon request, and they are posted on the board's website and summarized on the computer screens during breaks. Any questions or comments regarding these procedures may be directed to Karen Lanfranca Rosardi, our administrative assistant, who's previously introduced to you. Thank you. Item 3 is board member comments. Board members have any comments they'd like to make at this time?
Sure, you get a comment out of me.
Okay.
Between the board meetings, I interact a lot with the ag community. I'm impressed to see a lot of visitors today, and that's what I tell people, is I tell them, come and talk to us. Chair Long will give you 3 minutes to express your opinion. We solicit actively your good ideas on how we can do a better job in managing water quality in California.
I'll go ahead and give my comment on 7 Jan. I participated in administrative coordination meeting for CV Salts. We refer to it as Salty 5 group, a conference call. Participated in 2 monthly regional board chairs meetings. Those are always, well, not always, but most of the times they're conference calls. One was on 7 Jan and the other was on 4 February. Last call, we talked a bit about the wetlands policy, a very critical policy that the state board is considering. Also, there's been a new contract signed on webcasting, and it sounds to be a lot better than what we've had before. We'll find out. But I've been told that these are to be archived, and if you want to search one, you don't have to search through the whole day or 2 days of presentations. That there's a way that you can go directly to the presentation of the topic that you're seeking. So that's going to be interesting to see. We still have a ways to go, and our goal at a point in time is to be able to have people to give individuals the ability to show up at our Fresno office or our Reading office and participate in this meeting with good two-way audio visual, and that still remains a major goal. We also talked about the agenda for the meeting of the Water Board chairs in April, and a major topic that the regional board chairs want to discuss with folks from the state board is how we can improve interaction between the state board and the regional boards. We think there's been tremendous improvement over the last few years, but there's some things that we can do, I think, that will make that even better, and that's what we want to be discussing. And I understand the executive officers are joining the board chairs at that meeting, and so that ought to be a very fruitful discussion. Also, in this room on the 24th of January was a meeting of the Food Safety Panel that I participated in. That panel is making good progress. This has turned out to be a much more arduous process, I think, than we even imagined in the beginning as we go through this. So I did not have any new grandchildren or great grandchildren. It's all been quiet. So with that, any other comments? It was Christmas time, the holiday season since the last meeting, and things tend to calm down. With that, we'll go to agenda item 3, and that's public comments.
4. It'd be
4, excuse me, I was on 3. Do we have some cards, Grant? Yes. And Bill, I'll call you up first of all. I know you submitted a card. Bill Crooks wanted to say a few things. Bill was the executive officer of this board for many years. He was the executive officer when I came on board the end of 1989. And Bill taught me a lot of things. He also taught me that that executive officers have a special place in this world. And I say that for Patrick's sake.
I express my gratitude for teaching him that.
Okay. I left this board in '96. Carl tried to keep me there, but he couldn't do it. I'm here today to talk to you about one of your employees, former employees, and that's Gordon Lee Boggs. And Doctor, you know how I am about my guys that I hired and gals, so you might have to bail me out for just a second. I'm going to give you a quick timeline. I'm going to stay within that 3 minutes, I hope. I started in state service in 1962 with the State Health Department. After 4 years, I'd had enough, and I went to the former State Water Quality Control Board. I worked directly under one of the best water quality, water pollution people that I've ever met, and that was Paul R. Bonderson. You'll find a building named for him down on 9th and O. When in 67 and then into 68, when the regime was changed and the State Water Resources Control Board came along, Mr. Bonderson's position was changed. I no longer worked directly for him, and so I was out of there. I came to work for where the action was, and that's this board right here. And that was the best job I ever had, by far. I'll always remember it. I came to work here in May of 1970, and for the next 20 plus years, I hired and fired every employee that this board had. And since I outlived the people that were there when I came, when the fellow executive officers got together, they all referred to this group as crooks, a bunch of crooks, hires. But I was proud of them, and I'm still proud of them today. In 1978, I interviewed a gentleman who had worked for the state board for a while, then went private, a very talented scientist. He was not an engineer. His name was Gordon Lee Boggs. Gordon came in at the bottom, entry-level position, and he left as this board's chief of the underground tank unit. He was a good man. He passed away in December. A number of your existing staff and a whole load of former staff people, along with family and friends, had a celebration of life for him this last Saturday. Many more people than were here today. He had a lot of friends. He was a good man. I apologize. My intention is that his name be put on the minutes of what a great employee he was. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill. I remember Gordon as being somebody who did great work, and you could always depend upon to deliver. And I would hope that the minutes would reflect that Gordon was remembered here today. I have a card from.
Sorry, could I just add, I had the pleasure actually of working with Gordon on the other side of the table when I was managing some tank work for a client in Yosemite of all places. And he was just one of the most reasonable and firm, but reasonable regulators we dealt with. And I'm really sad to hear of his departure.
Any further comments? I also have a card from Ned Coe, Supervisor, Modoc County.
Good morning, members of the board and staff. My name is Ned Coe. I'm a supervisor in Modoc County, District 1. Modoc County is headwaters of the Central Valley watershed, 325 miles from this location right here to where I live on a creek that flows into the Pitt River. I'm here to have a brief request with you to develop the data set to test the hypothesis that the segment of the Pitt River upstream from the confluence of the Fall River be considered for delisting under the 303D as a cold water designated stream. This consideration was listed in your triennial review, but thus far, we have not seen any action on this. I would ask that the board authorize funding for data collection. Most landowners in the upper Pitt River are small family farms and ranches that lack the resources to support this data collection, even though they've done significant work already in water quality improvement up there. The stream temperature data from the 2004 Upper Pitt River assessment demonstrates that obtaining a cold water fishery would be extremely difficult, or I might add, even impossible, as the Upper Pitt River flows through a valley from Althurst to Canby called the Warm Springs Valley. This valley has numerous naturally occurring hot water springs that do flow into the Pitt River, along with similar hot water springs in Big Valley, the two primary areas of the upper reaches of the Pitt River. In conclusion, I would just like to say that an old saying, no matter how hard you work, you can't create a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And likewise, no matter how hard we work and hope, we can't create a cold water stream out of something that nature has created as something else naturally. So thank you for your time, and I do have a couple of reports that I'll pass to the staff.
Thank you very much for your comments. That project has been on my list for a long time. It seems that we have fires that, no, we have issues come along that tend to gobble up resources. Where are we now on addressing that issue, Patrick?
So at the December board meeting, the regional board approved the triennial review. The reassessment of beneficial uses in the Pitt River reached the highest category of ranked reviews, and we will be addressing that as a priority within the next 3 years. So we will be looking at that. The basin planning process is a slow-moving process. We wish it could be a little quicker, but that absolutely was a priority of the board to get to that, to take a hard look at how the Pitt River is regulated under our basin plan. I think Adam has a couple more words on the Pitt River in particular that really show that the regional board is trying to focus on that and move the ball forward there.
And I believe, are you going to be there on the 19th when I'm up in Modoc County?
I'm trying to
Okay.
make that work in my schedule. Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. And that's I'm going to be up there, and I'm specifically going to discuss the 303D listings along the South Fork and North Fork of the Pitt River and from the confluence down to Shasta Lake. My understanding is at least the South Fork is listed for pH and salinity, and the North Fork is listed, I believe, for pH above the confluence near Alturas. From Alturas, the confluence of the North and South Fork, we do have listings for temperature and a number of other constituents, and that's the area I believe that you're concerned about, where the river, there's a spot where it slows down a little bit, there's places where the water warms, and there's also the entrance of some hot springs and things like that. So we're going to have a discussion up there, and part of one of the things that I need to find out when I go up there is how much data do we have right now, what do we know, and what do we need to know to move this ball forward. And I don't know right now what's in our triennial review is to ask the question of what beneficial uses are most applicable for that reach. We may come to the point after collecting all the necessary data that beneficial use applies, or we may come to the conclusion that it does not apply. We don't know right now, but we need the data.
Well, it's fact-based. Your findings are fact-based, so that's where we're going. And just let me add, it is really something that was moved to the top of the priority list. So
I appreciate that.
you can tell your constituents they can go to a meeting on the 19th and ask all the questions they have. So
Thank you.
thank you very much.
I just wanted to say thank you for traveling 325 miles to speak to us. I appreciate that. And I have been up to Modoc County and did a hike once around the South Warner Mountains that was pretty special. And I think, is Lava Beds in Modoc too? I can't remember. Yeah, so it's a great place to visit. So at some point, I'm going to remake that trek, the 325 miles back to Modoc. Thank you.
Well, that's beautiful country up there, for no doubt about it.
Adam commented that he has room in his car, so.
Yeah. The 325 miles is why we would like to be able to have you having to drive no farther than Reading, which would still be a trip for you, and testify in front of this board at Reading. I think that would be a great service to the folks in our region. Dan, did you want to say something?
I have a question for staff about the deadline for the next review of the 303D list. You know, one of the concerns I had in one of my early meetings was we had some ranch types here that were, you know, hearing that, you know, the deadline had passed for data collection prior to the review for the 303D list. Can you give me an update on that?
Yeah, Adam. No, I will say that it's the 303D list is ultimately a state water board responsibility, and they tend to set the deadlines, and I think they have placed a premium on certain types of data being into that system. We've been engaged quite a bit with the State Water Board about how we can get good quality data into the overall consideration of the 303D listings and the 303D listing process. We've heard a lot from a lot of constituents, including tribal groups and some environmental groups, and frankly some dischargers and some ranchers and some growers, that when they collect data, they have to walk through a maze to get it into the State Water Board system. And that, you know, the data with certain requirements is being rejected, even though it's still good data. So I think that's where you hear a lot of noise about what data is getting in, what data isn't getting in, and also the fact that the door closes on the data. And so very often the regional board is considering a 303D list that eventually goes to the state board, where the list closed a few years ago. I think Adam might be able to talk to exactly the timelines that we're talking about, but those are ongoing issues. We keep pushing to try and get most accurate, most recent representative data. As the scientists say, there's a lot of room for debate within those terminology about what's reliable, what's not reliable, and what's meaningful for the 303D listing. Adam, I don't know if you could let them know what the exact status is these days, but it's a little bit in flux, is my understanding.
I can give a little bit more detail, but basically we have two things going on right now. We have without confusing things too much, there's what we're doing now is we call a mid-cycle listing or delisting, where we're looking at the data mid-cycle in between when we would typically look. That data set is closed. I believe it closed almost more than maybe a year and a half ago. Is that right, Jen?
Yeah, I think it closed,
Okay. In that one, we're specifically looking at some constituents. We're not doing a entire 303D listing, look at the entire 303D list. There's also another cycle coming, I believe it's the 2020 cycle. That information, what I can do is we can either ask Jen LeBay, who's our 303D list manager, maybe to come tomorrow and give a very short data set, or I can send an email to you to give you the actual dates. I don't know the dates of that closing.
Let's do that. Take it either now or the next board meeting, and but we do need to follow up on this, and I do think that when we're talking about how to better deal with the state board, with some folks in the state board, that's I wrote it down. That's
June 14th apparently is the date.
yeah, that's a checklist on my list. Okay, anything else? Thank you very much. State Board Member Tam Dudek. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here this morning. It's always a pleasure to watch the regional board in action, especially given the items on your agenda today. I look forward to listening to it. couple things from the State Water Board. Thank you for that discussion with respect to data management. I would recommend, among other things, if you might want to invite Greg Gerhardt, who is our Deputy Director for Information Management and Analysis, to perhaps come meet individually with you or present an informational item on what he's doing to try to improve the whole issue of data collection through SWAMP and through other databases that we have to make sure that the data we are collecting is meaningful and looking for ways to more efficiently integrate those kind of data. He has been very dedicated, committed to this effort, so I think some information from him might be fruitful in the future.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Well, I'm done for the day. The chairman earlier mentioned wetlands. Well, that seems to be the last 2 weeks, all I've been focusing on. 2 weeks ago, the State Water Board held a workshop item on the staff proposed policy, which includes a wetlands definition, as well as procedures for regulating discharges of dredge or fill materials to water the states. This effort has been in the works for over 10 years, and I was amazed during the board workshop to see how much confusion there still exists between what the staff is proposing, what the staff's intentions were in making their proposal, and how that is being perceived by our stakeholder. And so we directed staff to meet with stakeholders to try to clarify some of those areas of confusions, and also to identify the policy issues where staff and stakeholders are not able to reach agreement on, but that state board members will have to consider and deliberate on when this item does come to us for consideration. So since that State Water Board workshop, staff has had, I believe it was either 6 or so meetings with various stakeholder groups. I attended 3 of those. I thought, again, the discussion was very informative. It seems like staff and some of the stakeholders are talking past each other. It was a lot of, we agree on the intention. It's like, how do we actually put it down on paper so that it reflects that? So staff held a broad workshop yesterday on this issue, and at this time, it's still being planned, as far as I know, for State Water Board consideration at our first March meeting, which would be March 5th, I believe. But I have not checked in with staff since yesterday, all-day workshop, so that might change. Again, it's a complicated issue. There's a lot of confusion. We want to be as clear as possible, so we'll take the time and hopefully get it right. And I'll just give you one more heads up. We're also anticipating, since I've already mentioned March 5th, on March 6th, the day after the State Water Board meeting, when we typically have either a workshop or, in this case, it might end up being a 2-day meeting. Staff is working on an informational item that might be of interest to you. It's regarding PFAS and PFOS and PFOA. I can never remember all that acronym, but I believe PFAS stands for polyfluoroalkyl substances, and it's a substance in a lot of materials, including food packaging, fire retardant materials, and it's been discovered in drinking water, and it's been an issue that's been popping up throughout the nation, actually, and a lot of our stakeholders, as well as our Division of Drinking Water, has been identifying where, and we're trying to, as much as possible, try to get ahead of it, but it is a very complicated issue. And so we will have an informational item, at least it's being planned at this time, on March 6th. And then finally, I wanted to let you know, I'm sure you've heard about it already, but Governor Newsom is very interested in safe and affordable drinking water, access to drinking water, and environmental justice issue. And so trailer bill language has been proposed by the administration on the safe and affordable drinking water. I think it's called the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Trailer Bill language or something like that. It's very similar to what was proposed last year, but it includes a new addition, which doesn't really affect us, but it's part of the trailer language proposal, and that is $50 million in general fund to the Department of Toxic Substances Control to clean up the acid-lead battery site in Southern California. And both the drinking water and this cleanup site is being put under the umbrella of environmental justice and trying to achieve better achieve the environmental justice goals and strategy that we all have. So that's a very exciting development for all of us who have been very focused, and I know all of you who have been focused on environmental justice issues for many years. So we look forward to seeing how that plays out in the legislature. So that's it for my update.
Thank you very much. Once again, very enlightening.
Tim, I just want to point out the timeliness and the need for action on the wetlands decision, as the federal administration is erasing wetland protections in some areas. I think California under Porter Cologne needs to move quickly in that direction. So thank you for your work on that.
Thank you. I definitely concur. This effort started even before I was on the State Water Board, which was many years ago. So I am also eager to see us make progress in this area. But it appeared very clearly to me that there is a lot of confusion. And I'm not expecting that, also all of a sudden, I'm not expecting for us to wait until there's 100% clarity and 100% agreement before considering this policy and moving ahead. But based on the meetings that I attended with stakeholders last week, I believe there is some grounds to be achieved in having these discussions and trying to find these area of agreements, and most importantly, trying to provide clarity as much as possible in what we consider. That to me is the most important thing. I don't want to rush to adopt something that no one can agree on what it actually says. And it occurs to me, especially during some of these staff meetings with stakeholders, where state board staff actually has some, among themselves, have some confusion about what is it that this actually says. And when you have 5 or more board members reading the same thing and potentially reaching different conclusions on what it says, then it is time to perhaps take the moment to make sure that we all understand what something means when it's being proposed.
Yeah, and I understand that, but not having anything is also of deep concern. So thank you for trying to move as quickly as possible. I appreciate it.
We want it to be quick, but we also want it to be meaningful, practical, and implementable, because otherwise it's not going to achieve what we want to achieve.
That's right, and it's not going to be perfect. Our CV salts program has a long ways to go, but in my opinion, we need to get it in place. And it's like building Rome. Rome wasn't built in a day, and you have to start someplace, and you keep modifying and going to get to your ultimate goal. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would also, very quickly, Tam, I just heard from your staff that the State Water Board has tentatively scheduled the meeting up in Reading for May 6th and 7th, where
That
the
is correct.
where the State Board will be heading up to the northern part of our region to conduct a meeting, primarily to take a look at some of the forestry management and fire rebuilding efforts that are going on up there in that part of the watershed. So I think we should certainly have a conversation with board members. It'd be very easy to send a couple board members to that, and if we wanted to, we could jointly notice for that more than 2 regional board members would be up there. But thanks again for having the state board focus and go to a meeting out there in Reading to talk to the community and see what the rebuilding efforts are like.
Yes. And just to be fair, in case anyone's listening, we also are planning a Southern California State Board
Absolutely,
meeting in San Diego. I believe it's going to be March 17 and 18, or 18 and 19, I can't remember exactly. But staff has been trying to get everyone's calendars together to make those 2 out of Sacramento meetings possible.
And I just want to thank you while you're here.
Thank you very much. Let's talk tomorrow. Let board members think about it and talk tomorrow about if we're going to have a couple of board members attending that meeting.
Absolutely, and I think it's very easy to have 2 board members attend. If we want to have more than 2 board members and we start getting to a subcommittee of the board, we can absolutely work with the state board to notice it as an item where there's going to be more than 2 board members.
Right. So if we could discuss that tomorrow.
Absolutely. Just received notice of it like yesterday.
Yes,
so
and I'll
that's-
move to agenda item 6, which is the executive officer's report. If there's any extensive discussion, I'd like to hold that till tomorrow. But certainly you have during this time presentation of employees awards.
Yeah, I do have a couple awards to hand out, very well-deserved awards. If you want to continue to take a look at the executive officer's report this evening, I will note that there has been, we've been tweaking the executive officer's report a little bit, trying to make it more useful for the board members, a little bit more concise. Take a look at the HAB, the harmful algal bloom reporting. We've changed that a little bit to try and make it a little more useful, so you don't have that 8-page table with 0.7 font. It's more a little more usable and a little more directed to what the actual water quality impacts are, where they are, and really so that it's both useful for the board members and for the public who wants to open up this executive officer's report and see what we're doing with respect to harmful algal blooms. And with that, I'll start with the employee awards, and I'll make my way over to the lectern.
Very good.
I do have one comment I want to make
Sure,
on
go
this
ahead.
report is that, you know, oil is usually always talked about in barrels, and I think there's 55 gallons to a barrel, but I don't remember. Clay probably knows. But in these reports, I think it would be useful, because the public is reading these, if we at least put in parentheses what that means in gallons on the spills and such. And then we can compare them a little bit to know. It'll be easier for most of us, and perhaps me also, to visualize what that means. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
Noted. Okay. Thank you, Bob.
So again, I've got 3 Superior Accomplishment Awards to give out, and they are very well deserved for all 3 of them, 2 of which actually we touched on already this morning with the conversations about the Pitt River. And those will go to Jennifer LeBay and Walt Plachta. But first, let me get the award for Jennifer LeBay. And I have great pleasure giving the award to Jennifer in particular, because this award is primarily reflective of the work that she's done since rejoining the Central Valley Water Board. Our desks were moved over from the State Board at the same day, so she has done quite a bit in a relatively short amount of time, and that's really what this award is all about. In the last 7 months, Jennifer has done an amazing job of stepping into the Senior Environmental Scientist Supervisory position and has excelled as the Non-Point Source Program Manager, supervising 5 staff while managing staff in 2 other offices. Jennifer also took on the added responsibility of overseeing the triennial review of the Central Valley Water Board's basin plans to fill a void left by the retirement of both our basin planner and our planning section program manager, and that was Betty Yee and Jeannie Chilcott, who both left the office at around the same time, took a lot of experience with them, and Jennifer filled into the breach very admirably. Last summer, Jennifer oversaw a successful board workshop regarding activities to address the nutrient problems in Clear Lake. The Clear Lake nutrient problems and inadequate efforts to address them have been a significant concern to the local tribes and to other stakeholders. Jennifer has been diligent and effective in reaching out to all of the stakeholders and getting better collaboration in addressing the nutrient problems at Clear Lake. She is working with the tribes and others to develop a nutrient outreach materials and is the Central Valley Water Board's representative to the recently formed Clear Lake Blue Ribbon Committee. Jennifer has done a good job of representing the interests of the Water Board and bringing issues back to the board for their consideration and input. Jennifer also did a stellar job of helping bring the Basin Plan Triennial Review to the board for approval. Her organizational skills and hard work made the board approval process very smooth, especially given that the new process was developed for this triennial review. And I'll take the blame. I did the new process and had Jennifer as a relatively new employee work that process, and she did great. In the relatively short time she has been in her current position, Jennifer has contributed tremendously to the success of both the Non-Point Source and planning programs. Her positive attitude and can-do spirit makes her a joy to work with, and her wonderful work ethic helps ensure that tasks are completed on time. For these reasons and so much more, Jennifer is worthy of the Sustained Superior Accomplishment Award. Congratulations, Jennifer. And we'll get some pictures at the conclusion.
Yeah, let me just add a little bit.
Absolutely.
I've had the pleasure of working with Jennifer on the Clear Lake Blue Ribbon Commission, and I really appreciate your work. I appreciate how you've diligently kept me informed. That's not an easy thing to do always. But I think that is a particularly important commission, and I'm glad you're there doing the work on behalf of the board. Thank you.
And if I could call up Walt Plachta. And Walt also worked with Jennifer on the triennial review, working through a new process. Walt Plachta is receiving this award because he has spent a considerable amount of time on two major projects, almost nonstop, since he started in the Fresno office over 1 year ago. These projects are the CV Salts program and the triennial review of the Tulare Lake and Sacramento San Joaquin basin plans. Both efforts are complex, long-term, and have involved addressing input from stakeholders and the general public. Walt has quickly come up to speed on these projects and has continued to do an excellent job despite the recent departures of key basin planning personnel from the Rancho Cordova office. And again, that's Jeannie Chilcott and Betty Yee casting long shadows over those programs. Walt's CV Salts efforts include attending the CV Salts Executive Committee meetings, driving all the way up from Fresno, and being the lead for the Fresno office. He also attends the Public Education and Outreach Committee meetings with the intent to educate stakeholders and get them ready for the implementation of the CV Salts program following state board approval. Walt is also the grant manager for the Nitrate Management Zone Early Implementation Grant. Work under this grant will consist of a pilot study that may be utilized as a blueprint for the CV Salts program. And I can't emphasize how important that was and how instrumental Walt was in getting that grant out the door. Walt's tasks include technical document review and managing the invoices for the project. Most recently, Walt prepared and presented a triennial review workshop item to the board at their meeting in Reading in October. He also prepared and presented a follow-up presentation to the board in December. As a result, the board adopted the Triennial Review Work Plan, which provides a roadmap for planning activities for the entire region for the next 3 years. Walt is reliable and professional and is very deserving of this award. Congratulations, Walt. I will say with all the awards that are given out, particularly Jennifer and Walt's, it reflects the board's basically focus on hiring for talent and not necessarily background in the program. Both Jennifer and Walt came in fairly cold to that triennial review program, and they just took it and ran with it and followed the new process without any blueprint of where to go. And I think that's really emblematic of the staff that we have throughout all three offices. And also emblematic of Daniel. Daniel, could you come up? Daniel Whitley. Good to see. Is an environmental scientist in the Reading Forest Activities Unit and is being recognized for his outstanding work performance. Daniel joined the Central Valley Water Board in 2013, bringing with him more than 20 years of experience working as an oologist. I assume that's geologist, biologist, zoologist. Okay, I think they just put that in there. From being a biologist for Caltrans and DFW to a botanist, then an ecologist with the Forest Service. So a collection of activities studying a variety of things in that particular area. In the 5 years Daniel has been with the Central Valley Water Board, he has made a considerable contributions to both the Forest Activities Unit and the Central Valley Water Board's forestry program as a whole. When initially hired, Daniel quickly learned the permitting and compliance aspects of the Forest Activities Program, ultimately taking a lead role in advancing our understanding of herbicide use and effects on water quality from timber harvesting activities. In addition to performing permitting and compliance actions in the Reading office for all of Plumas County, Daniel concurrently led the development and execution of 2 contracts with the USGS to further our access to cutting-edge passive sampling systems for researching herbicide impacts, putting the board on the cutting edge of this research. The Central Valley Water Board's Forest Activities Program has grown substantially since Daniel was first hired, and without hesitation, Daniel has assisted new staff and encouraged them to invest in projects and topics that interest them and benefit the board. Daniel has become our go-to person in the Reading office for passive sampling technology and implementation and information on forestry herbicide impacts, and has continually been willing to assist other staff in whatever capacity he can. Daniel aided in the planning and implementation of the board's 2017 General Order for timberland management activities, and specifically for those activities relating to post-fire salvage logging activities, including the importance of ground cover and herbicide application timing. And just that 2017 General Order is probably one of the more complex orders we have on our books. So navigating those in a successful manner that actually lets folks sign up for the program and get regulated and get the logging activities done that they need to get done is really a key part of that program. Daniel is required to balance numerous priorities in his position. He regularly looks for ways to turn ideas into actions and develop strategies for implementation. He is an innovative and creative thinker, and he encourages others to be creative in developing solutions. The Central Valley Water Board is fortunate to have Daniel and greatly appreciates his contributions. Congratulations, Daniel. And if we want to get a few pictures with the board of the
Thank you very much, and we'll return to the executive officer's report tomorrow morning. At this point in time, we're going to be moving to agenda item 17. It was moved up from from tomorrow, and that was noticed. At this time, the board will hear a presentation on the efforts.
Carl, I'm
Yes.
sorry to interrupt. I'd said 55, but it's 42 gallons to a barrel oil.
42 gallons a barrel. Good. Thank you, Bob. This time, the board will hear a presentation on the efforts to clean up trash in Steelhead Creek in Sacramento. This is an information item only, and no action will be taken, although the board may ask questions and provide direction to staff. Interested persons will then be allowed 3 minutes each to address the board. We'll now hear the staff presentation.
Good morning, Chair Longley and members of the board. My name is Rich Mall, and I'm an environmental scientist in your Sacramento office. Today, I'm discussing the Steelhead Trash Removal Project. This was a pilot project to see if water board staff, along with local, state, and federal agencies, can work together to clean up trash in a highly impacted and sensitive water body. The project was a response to complaints regarding a large volume of trash and debris in Steelhead Creek. On November 1st, 2018, Dr. Brady and Crystal Tobias made a presentation to state and local agencies showing the high volume of trash within Steelhead Creek. The collaborative cleanup project was a response to this complaint. So the area of concern is Steelhead Creek, and Steelhead Creek watershed comprises approximately 181 square miles of land in greater Sacramento metropolitan area. It includes significant portions of the Natomas area, northeastern Sacramento County, southern Placer County, and a small portion of Sutter County. Steelhead Creek, formerly known as the Natomas East Drainage Canal, flows into the Sacramento River immediately upstream from the confluence of the American and Sacramento rivers. Steelhead Creek is used by fall run Chinook salmon and steelhead trout, which must pass through this section of the creek on their way to Dry Creek to spawn. The immediate area of concern was immediately upstream of the El Camino Bridge and directly above the American River Parkway. The County of Sacramento has removed a large portion of the trash from the American River Parkway, and so this was an urgent effort to remove the trash prior to significant rain, which would have washed the trash through the parkway into the American River and down into the Delta. On December 10th through December 13th, a joint effort was made to clean up the trash. A week prior to the cleanup, the rangers notified the campers, because there's campers in the area, to move their trash to the side of their camp so that could also be picked up. So these are the participating agencies in the cleanup. It was a collaborative effort. We had a lot of good response from everybody. It was the City of Sacramento Maintenance and Parks Ranger Division, the City of Sacramento Utilities, Reclamation District 1000, the American River Flood Control District, Regional SAN, the County of Sacramento, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, California Department of Water Resources, and the Central Valley Water Board. At this, I'd like to especially thank Robert Conroy, the supervising park ranger, and Shannon Brown with the Parks Department for really collaborating this effort. Ranger Conroy was there the entire time and kind of made sure everything ran smoothly. I'm pretty sure without his efforts and diligence to stay there, it was kind of wet conditions, it was muddy, it wasn't the greatest weather, and he stayed on site the whole time. And I don't think it would have been as effective, the cleanup would have been as effective if he wasn't there. So the trash is located in areas adjacent to the creek, and the trash was also located in the creek. And the trash in the creek is most likely hampering the steelhead trout and Chinook salmon from swimming upstream. So the effort had many challenges. We had 70 homeless camps in the area and a really high concentration of trash. And we were not able to actually clean up in the creek channel. The reason is we would have had to have both state and federal permits to do that, and it was such a short timeline, we just could not get those permits. So we basically cleaned up out in the riparian areas outside of the creek channel and removed a significant amount of trash. If you look at the left-hand the picture on the left-hand side, that's actually a camper's tent. It's on a platform, it's got pontoons under it, and it floats up and down with the water level when it comes up and down in the creek, kind of ingenious. The one on the right just kind of shows you how much trash was in the creek. So really dense areas of a lot of trash. So we used a combination of hand crews and heavy equipment to remove the trash. We had really wet working conditions, which wasn't ideal for sure, and it made the cleanup a lot more challenging for us. In the photograph to the left, you can see some of the specialized tracked equipment that was able to run through the mud and navigate the muddy conditions. In the photograph to the right, you can see one of the work crews at work. We had two 10-person crews working pretty much all those 4 days, and they were pretty resourceful. What they did is they found tarps or tents or something else that was flat, put the trash on it, and then skidded it to the side where heavy equipment then loaded it onto trucks. So the trash and debris included, but was not limited to, batteries, gasoline, oil, propane, paper, wood, other materials, but there was everything. There were lawnmowers, there was a chainsaw, there was a outboard motor, I can keep going. There was just a lot of stuff there. So the cleanup was really critical prior to the rain, or that stuff most likely would have washed into the watershed. So here's kind of a before and after picture. The one on the left is kind of an area before, and it's the same general area on the right. We didn't clean up all the trash. There are still some areas of dense trash we were unable to get to. There were, the crews made a sweep the last day just to pick up the more diffuse trash that was kind of scattered around. We got a lot of that picked up, but there's still some trash there. And I recently saw pictures where the trash is now washed downstream back into the area. So it's kind of an ongoing process. But in the end, we were able to remove 120,000 pounds of trash in 4 days for a cost of around $50,000. So fairly successful. So next steps, next week, we're going to hold a meeting. After the cleanup, all the agencies were interested in somehow cleaning up the creek channel and going in and protecting the area somehow. So we're going to meet to see if we can move forward with it, to get the permits to clean up in the creek channel, but also to see if we can just protect the riparian areas, both the upland areas and the creek channel. So we're going to look at funding. We're going to look at all the options to get that work done. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a short video that kind of summarizes sort of what I'm talking about, or some of the stuff.
Steelhead Creek is vital habitat for endangered salmon in the heart of Sacramento. But more than 70 homeless camps in its floodplain produce large amounts of trash and debris, partially clogging the creek and hampering the fish from spawning.
This is very valuable habitat. This is no way to treat it.
The situation becomes more dire when it rains. Water levels can rise quickly, posing a serious safety risk to campers and washing enormous amounts of debris downstream into the Sacramento River and eventually into San Francisco Bay. While the Central Valley Water Board recognizes the multitude of challenges related to the issue of homelessness, the Water Code and Clean Water Act require that trash and debris be removed from the floodplain. And this removal must occur before the water rises. So in December, the Water Board organized an intensive 4-day cleanup. We worked diligently to unite multiple jurisdictions. Heavy equipment was provided by the American River Flood Control Agency and Reclamation District 1000. The Sacramento County Sheriff's work crew provided dozens of inmates each day to remove trash and debris. The city of Sacramento was an important partner, as were many of the campers themselves, thanks to our Office of Public Affairs encouraging them to cooperate with cleanup crews.
I've been doing a lot of tires and a lot of shopping carts. A lot of shopping carts, a lot of plastic bags, a lot of mattresses.
Despite numerous challenges, including nearby homeless shelters at capacity, making it difficult for campers to move, this urgent joint effort was a success. In the end, with all these jurisdictions working together, we were able to remove 120,000 pounds of trash.
Most of this is just uncontrolled and has been uncontrolled for years. And that's the big breakthrough, that Parks has been actively trying to clean out their venue, but this part of the county and the city has never received a really thorough cleaning and long-term management. So this, for me, is a really exciting day.
Of course, this one-time cleanup is just the beginning. We look forward to partnering with stakeholders in the future to keep our waterways clean.
Does anyone have any questions on the cleanup, on what happened or what we did or anything?
Well, Dr. Longley?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I have a comment, and it's wonderful, I mean, how much time and effort you guys and everybody working together to get it cleaned up. But obviously, this seems like, I'm guessing in the next few months, it's gonna start heading back the same direction. So my concern is, or my question is, how do we prevent that from happening? How do we do the ongoing maintenance? You know, I understand in county areas, you know, county cleanup crews handle parks and certain things. This river area, whose responsibility does that fall under? Whose jurisdiction is it to keep an ongoing cleanup?
It's a bit of everybody's, to be quite honest. I think a lot of this happens on county lands, but you also have the involvement of, as Rich mentioned, the city, flood control district, reclamation district 1000. So there's a lot of shared responsibility here. I think ultimately a lot of the responsibility rests with the landowner, which is the county, but they have very limited funds to do this type of work. I think really one of the main benefits to, well, first to your question of kind of how do we stop this, I think it's going to be really tough to stop the accumulation of trash in these areas until we solve the homeless problem, until we find safe, affordable options for these folks to live long term. I think that you're still going to see a lot of camping in these areas. It's just human beings' natural tendency to gravitate towards waterways. It's a relatively nice area. I hesitate to say that because it's still grueling conditions that they live under, but that's where these folks are going to be camping out, and so there's going to be continual trash accumulation. So I think, though, that in terms of how we manage this problem going forward, the city, the county, the districts are all kind of thinking outside the box to try and work on solutions. I think this is one kind of almost a demonstration project to show how this can work. And I think the city and the county in particular are exploring ways of actually paying some of the homeless population to do some of the work in this area, to continuously clean up some of these areas and to get the trash moving out of these sensitive watershed areas. But realistically, while this is a project that shows what can be done, we're going to continue to talk with all the players in this area to try and make sure that we have continuous improvement and continuous maintenance of these areas.
I think that's a great idea. As I mentioned before, in Kern County, the homeless shelter actually has its residents working with the county to do cleanup on freeways and side of the roads, and so it's a great concept, but I just think there has to be a lead agency to really care about making this happen. So city, county working together, great. Water, just, us with them is wonderful, but I think definitely somebody has to take the lead.
Yeah.
But great job. That's wonderful. You guys did a lot of great work.
I think there's, for what's worth, I think there's a lot of advocacy that absolutely reflects that position. I think, and realistically, when we talked with a lot of these folks in advance of this cleanup, I think everybody was expressed a little bit of reluctance because they were kind of concerned. Well, am I going to be the lead of this thing moving forward? So I think that there needs to be a lot of structural discussions, and those discussions are ongoing, about making sure that we have long-term financing, long-term positions really to manage this type of work moving forward into the future. So those conversations are absolutely ongoing. We're very lucky to have a mayor who is taking these issues very seriously, a county council that's taking these issues very seriously, and frankly, a state government that is looking for long-term solutions and that views housing as essentially the existential issue for California moving into the next 10, 20 years.
Thank you. Any further comments by board members?
Yeah, I've got a comment. Are we collecting any data on Steelhead Creek? Is that connected with the E. coli work we're doing? There's people near the creek?
I think the short answer is yes. We are collecting data. Some of the work that we're working through with SFEI will interplay with Steelhead Creek. It's kind of one of the watersheds that we're very concerned about. One of the other issues, and just to kind of a prelude, it's interesting how all these issues that have come up earlier tie together. But both the 303D listings and the triennial review also play into how we manage these watersheds. As you know, there's a trash policy that the state board has adopted, and that really shows that it's the state's priority to get trash cleanups in these watersheds, regardless of where you are in the state, whether it's LA County, whether it's Sacramento County, whether it's Fresno County, and any area where there's a trash contribution to a surface water, it's a state's priority to get that trash cleaned up. However, the metrics for what you do to list a water body under the 303D list and what you do when it's listed as impaired is something that very, very much is open for discussion. And I think that those conversations are absolutely ongoing, and we're going to continue to participate in those conversations moving forward.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I remember when we had the discussions about this issue, it was a couple of years ago, and it was everybody trying to come together to figure out how to resolve the issue. And I'm just impressed that from that time to now, what was done was, to me, I think, significant. I mean, if that could happen 4 times a year and you had the homeless people out there doing their part to help contribute to it, cleanup, I think it would be something that could, carry on, because how all of the players came together, the partners, to do this, when no one knew how, but it was a crisis that needed to be addressed, and where we are today, I think is commendable. And however the homeless population can be involved as a part of the solution, and, I think it helps the situation versus someone coming in and doing the cleanup. Have them be a part of that process, because that's unfortunate, the situation that they're in, but them contributing to improving the quality of life and where they're living and how they're having to live, and overall improving the area for the waterways and all of that. I think it's a good start, and I'd just like to see it continue. And as you mentioned, financing is really a key to help make that happen. But good job, and thank you for the report.
Thank you. Any further comments? Yes, Bob?
I just wanted to thank our staff and you for your help on this. I also want to acknowledge in particular, the parks folks that worked on this, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And, these are agencies for this that are notoriously underfunded, and the dedication they show and the work they do, and their, I don't know what to say, intrinsic care and feelings of stewardship are central to making this happen. And the other, it's not just symbolic, it's real, is we just don't have this cleanup notice. Attached to it is a lot of resources for the homeless. And I think that shows that partnership, that we're not trying to vilify people, we're not trying to criminalize people, we're trying to solve a problem, a couple problems. One is homeless, and also cleaning up the trash and taking care of this habitat. So thank you.
And so we can have interested persons comment on this, and we do have an award to give out to the
Yes.
participating agencies as well.
So I'll move on to, thank you very much for the presentation. And we'll move on to interested persons. I have a card from Randy Smith.
I'm Randy Smith. I live in Sacramento. I've spent time along Steelhead Creek. I live along Arcade Creek, which is a tributary to Steelhead Creek, and done a lot to remove trash in Arcade Creek. And in the process, and also working with the illegal camps that are causing so much of this trash. And there's something that has been working in Arcade Creek as a tributary to Steelhead Creek. I'd like to see if it could be implemented along Steelhead Creek by the city and the county, where they designated a natural habitat area and effectively had to close it down as a restoration area. I mean, no one can go down there, but in the effect, it allowed the city park rangers to say, no one can be down here, not even the campers that are bringing so much of the garbage that has been put along Steelhead Creek and Arcade Creek upstream. But you mentioned, board member Brar, what can be done so we don't have to keep cleaning this up. This might be something to look into, and I would like to ask if I could participate in, if there's meetings coming up in the next few weeks. It sounded like Rich Mull was going to have more meetings. I would like to be included in those meetings if I could, please. Thank you. And thank you for all you've done in recognizing this issue from a year ago. It was February 1st, at your last board meeting a year ago. We're recognizing the problems that are here. And I feel for the, we all feel for the homeless people, but impacting our waterways this way is just not an option. And we need to find a solution. I think we can get one. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Can we make sure that Mr. Smith he has his address here on the card, that he is notified of the future meetings?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And I think some of those meetings may be internal meetings with the folks that are financing the cleanups, but to the extent that there's any public meetings,
Certainly.
we will be inviting them.
I have a card from Roland Brady. Roland, on those videos, you already used all your time up. Come in.
Thank you very much, Board. I would like to convey my sincere appreciation for the steps, the initiative that you all have taken. We've come a long way in the last year. And because of the actions that you've taken and implemented, I'm assembling a outstanding team to apply for the DWR Urban Streams Restoration Grant, which is significant to restore or rehabilitate the habitat of Steelhead Creek and once again make it a community amenity. Steelhead Creek does flow through an underserved area, and this is important in receiving these grants from DWR. It's important ecologically, it's important sociologically, and also I'd like to acknowledge my appreciation to Jessica Cervantes, who was on Rich's video, and her small group, cadre of group, who have really taken the initiative, personal initiative, to try to educate their neighbor campers. Jessica lives on the creek and has been there for almost a year, and I ran into her camp, which was absolutely immaculate, and asked her if she would participate in trying to clean this up. And there's a cadre of 4 campers that have had the Better Homes and Gardens Clean Camp Award, and I've made the recommendation to Parks and also to Supervisor Cerna that they be included in the Pride Industries effort to clean up the creek. There's new monies to engage homeless people in cleaning up the areas. And I certainly hope if the board is involved at all that they support that these 4 people be included in the cleanup. So once again, without the steps that you all have taken, I wouldn't have a prayer of getting this grant from DWR. I don't know if I have a prayer anyway. It's going to be highly competitive, but I really, really appreciate it. And on behalf of everybody that's involved, thank you for taking the initiative in these steps. I know that it's been politically really complicated, technically really complicated, organizationally really complicated, but I think we've got some traction, momentum now to build on. So it's great what you guys have done. Not guys, what you all have done. So thank you very much.
I might add that I've known Roland for a long time. We were colleagues at Fresno State. I know when Roland gets involved in something, he puts his whole heart into it. Thank you, Roland, for what you've done.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say that your heart really shows through. It shows in the interview. It shows when you speak. And so I'm really glad to meet you in person because I can see how much you care. So thank you.
A card from Crystal Tobias.
Thank you, board and staff. I am the other half of the Steelhead Restoration Creek team with Roland Beatty. I have been working in the American River watershed for decades with the American River Parkway Foundation, Save the American River Association, and now my own organization, Friends of Lakes Folsom and Natoma, up at the state park in Folsom. I started working with Dr. Brady this past year, and I am here to express strong support for the restoration of Steelhead Creek, which is a beautiful amenity to our community that I had no idea about. We've been collecting data this past year on the type and the amount of trash in the channel, which includes significant hazardous materials such as batteries, gas and oil, electronics, as you heard from Richard Moll's presentation, and also significant amount of human waste because there's no place else for the campers to go and they throw it in the water and it comes out at Discovery Park, and it's a significant issue with the E. coli as well. It's not the only one, but it's a big one. We have had, with support from the Water Board, some success removing many thousands of pounds of trash from the illegal camps and dumping. However, much work needs to be done, and there, as you can see from recent photographs after the cleanups, there's as much trash there now as there was before we started the cleanup. So you know, your point is taken about how do you stop it from continuing, and that's where the collaboration with the city, the county, all of the agencies that are involved, working with the homeless themselves, which we've had some success with. We have got to work on this together. It is vital, or this little stream is going to die. And it's just part of a bigger issue of fisheries in our state, and if all of the little streams that provide habitat for the salmon and the steelhead all become impacted like this, and many of them are, our salmon fisheries they're already suffering. So it's just part of this, think globally, act locally, and that's what I'm trying to do. That's what we're trying to do. And we're really, really grateful to have this opportunity today to be here to support the board going forward with this effort. And we will do whatever it takes. We want to be involved, and we're just happy to be having these conversations. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have one comment. All the discussion around hazardous materials has me wondering what kind of training was required for the cleanup crews and what kind of training hurdles would be posed by engaging the homeless. And that's, you don't have to address that question now. And then being a person who uses that area of the parkway frequently, I noticed there aren't very many trash receptacles along that stretch. And it seems like a source control issue at some level, that there's no other place to put the trash if you're camping in that area. So that might be a suggestion for the county to either increase the receptacles that are there or make them larger, put some bins in. So that's my view. And thank you for all the work you guys are doing. I know it's a big challenge.
Is there any further discussion by the board? Seeing none, then.
Dr. Longley, there's a card in the back that's being waved.
Yes. Come forward, please, sir. Thank you. Bill Templin, retired hydrologist.
An environmental scientist with this agency. Indeed, we are.
I know you will, Bill. Go ahead.
And we have worked in Kings Canyon, Kings River area, and some of the areas in Fresno. I want to thank you for letting me come up and talk briefly. I usually wait until I hear what everybody else has to say before I try to contribute, and so I don't repeat. But I'm representing Trout Unlimited, and I'm the president of the local chapter here of Trout Unlimited for the Sac Sierra region. And I wanted to let you know that last year when I came and talked at this meeting, it was very dire, and it's much improved now. But like you said, it's going to get worse again, and people are moving back in. But what I wanted to say that's different is I noticed last week when Randy and I were on Steelhead Creek that there were more campers outside the levee, along the outside levee, than there were inside by far. And that's an improvement in the watershed, in the floodplain, but it's creating a problem outside. So that does remove the probability that they're dumping their human waste into the creek, but there's still many people camp there. And then from the fisheries standpoint, I'm implementing a water quality fisheries monitoring effort on Arcade Creek, which is one of the creeks you saw in that picture that drains into Steelhead Creek downstream of where Dry Creek comes in. And when I came here last year, I noticed for 2 years that the salmon were coming up in Arcade Creek. Last year, after I was here, and this year, we've seen no salmon in Arcade Creek. So, but they are going up to Dry Creek. But there's a water supply source feeding Dry Creek that's coming from the Upper American and Yuba Basin. Arcade Creek doesn't have that, Dry Creek does. So that's one of the factors that I know is going to be a limiting factor in Arcade Creek's restoration. But we're starting to work on that as a project with Trout Unlimited. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the information. Seeing no questions, we'll move then to presentation of awards. And Patrick, are you going to join me at the?
Absolutely.
And we request that representatives from the Reclamation District 1000, the American River Flood Control District, the City of Sacramento Maintenance and Parks Division, and Sacramento Regional County Sanitation District join us here at the podium. Well, this is a great occasion to really commend these agencies who have acted decisively and collaboratively to implement an intensive trash cleanup in the floodplain of Steelhead Creek. Without this effort, over 120,000 pounds of trash would have been washed into the river and delta, negatively impacting water quality and habitat. The Central Valley Water Board commends you, all of you, and the folks that you work with for your efforts to protect water quality, and we look forward to partnering with you in the future. Once again, thank you very much for your effort and participation in this great effort. And we need to hand the awards out. First award goes to Tim Kerr, American River Flood Control District. Thank you. Thank you very much. Why don't you get around here between us and Patrick, why don't you go on the other side?
That camera will be ever present.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope I say this correctly. The next award goes to Paul Devereux. Devereaux, there you go. Reclamation District 1000.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. Hi.
And the next award goes to Sac Regional County Sanitation District. And you are?
Carolyn Blash.
Carolyn Blash. Thank you very much, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next award goes to City of Sacramento Maintenance and Park Ranger Division. And who's accepting on their behalf? All of you, great. And could you identify yourselves, please, in the microphone?
My name's Shannon Brown. I'm the interim director for the City of Sacramento Parks and Recreation Department.
And who's with you?
I'll let them introduce
Okay.
themselves.
Eugene Lowe, the Park Maintenance Manager for the City of Sacramento.
Sergeant Robert Conroy, Park Ranger Supervisor.
Thank you. And we'll give you this award, and thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we will now take a short recess. I'd like to have you back here in about 7 minutes, 25 minutes to 11, and we'll begin the irrigated lands item. What's that, item number? What happens when you wait?
Your microphone is on, Carl.
One board member has been delayed, so we will continue for a couple minutes.
I planted it. It's pretty good, huh? And you know, of course, I looked over all the 303 listings before that, and I don't really have all of it in my head. I've already forgotten, in fact.
So we're on, the board's back in session, and we're on agenda item 7. Just one of the things, that, as you heard me say earlier when we were talking, we really need to talk about how this is focused on the East San Joaquin Coalition permit, and what the state board put into that we've been mandated, quite frankly, to adopt for others. We're not talking about Sigma or CV salts or anything else, but I'm sure you'll cover all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. So good morning, Chair Longley, Vice Chair Kadara, members of the board. I'm Sue McConnell, the Irrigate Lands Program Manager, and I've taken the oath. I will be presenting an overview of the proposed amendments for 7 Irrigate Lands general waste discharge requirements. So we'll start with just a little background on the Irrigate Lands Program, then discuss the East San Joaquin petition order, and specifically the elements being considered for incorporation into the other Irrigate Lands General Waste Discharge Requirements, or WDRs, also referred to as general orders. I'll discuss the outreach for the update effort, the comments and response to comments, and wrap up with staff's recommendation. There are 9 Irrigate Lands General Waste Discharge Requirements. 7 apply to groups of growers within a geographic area. 1 is commodity specific for the California Rice Commission, and the last general order is for growers who choose to be regulated individually. There is 1 coalition for each of the 8 coalition-based WDRs, except for the Tulare Lake Basin, which has 7 coalitions, making a total of 14 coalitions in our region. Today we'll discuss updates to all coalition-based general orders except for the East San Joaquin General Order, which has already been updated by the State Water Board. This is the East San Joaquin Coalition area and the location of the first Irrigate Lands General Order. The State Water Board's response to the petitions of this general order is driving the order updates before you today. So this is a simplified timeline for the Irrigate Lands Program beginning in 2003. Towards the middle of the timeline, you'll see the adoption of the East San Joaquin General WDRs, which was petitioned to the State Water Board. In response to that, the petitions, the State Water Board issued 2 draft orders, held multiple board and staff workshops, and provided 2 opportunities for written comments prior to adoption of the final order exactly 1 year ago on February 7th, 2018. I'll be referring to that as the petition order. The State Water Board updated the East San Joaquin General WDRs as a part of the petition order, and it also deemed certain petition order elements precedential, requiring their inclusion in all Irrigate Lands programs statewide. So a key issue for the petition order is addressing excess nitrates in groundwater. Elevated nitrogen concentrations in drinking water can have significant human health impacts. It can interfere with the blood's ability to carry oxygen and cause a condition called blue baby syndrome. These concerns resulted in the petition order adding to the program's existing requirements for growers to account for nitrogen in their operations. both the nitrogen applied, referred to as A, and the nitrogen removed, referred to as R. So this is a very simplified schematic of how growers account for nitrogen. Please note that nitrogen applied includes more than just the synthetic fertilizer. It includes nitrogen contributions from other sources, such as organic amendments and irrigation water. And the nitrogen removed includes more than what comes from harvested crops, especially for tree crops. The goal of more accurate nitrogen accounting is to obtain a better understanding of how much nitrogen might be available to leach to groundwater. So the petition order includes new requirements for coalition members, coalitions, and the Central Valley Water Board. And many of these requirements are linked for the parties involved. For instance, coalition members will be required to use templates developed by the coalitions and approved by our executive officer. Today, we will focus on the requirements that affect the update of the general orders. So please note that the petition order specifically exempts the California Rice Commission from the irrigation and nitrogen management requirements. The State Water Board recognized the low potential for nitrogen discharges from rice operations due to their unique growing practices. So discussions in the following slides regarding irrigation and nitrogen management apply to all coalitions but the California Rice Commission. The petition order mandates revisions to some existing irrigated lands requirements as well as inclusion of some new requirements. Implementing the petition order elements will result in increasing reporting by coalitions and their members, as well as increased monitoring for coalition members. So we'll start with discussing some of the revised irrigated lands requirements mandated by the petition order. For example, growers will be developing irrigation nitrogen management plans instead of nitrogen management plans. And the irrigation nitrogen management plan summary reports will replace the nitrogen management plan summary reports, and it'll be required of all members instead of just the members in high vulnerability areas. Those summary reports will also include additional information, including management practices and outlier identification. Farm evaluations will be required every 5 years instead of annually. And there'll be a set process for defining AR outliers. Those are growers who apply significantly more fertilizer than their peers while obtaining similar yields. The petition order also mandates deadlines for development of nitrogen remove coefficients and a process for their approval. It mandated data reporting with anonymous identifiers so we can correlate AR data with management practice data and look for potential trends. And it mandated annual outreach for all coalition members along with specific requirements for that outreach. So some of the new requirements mandated by the petition order include having coalitions develop a groundwater protection formula to generate township-specific values and targets for their groundwater quality management plans. This methodology was developed jointly by the coalitions and the environmental justice representatives to address nitrogen loading to groundwater. There's also a new on-farm drinking water well monitoring program for nitrates, which affects the coalition members and landowners. The monitoring data must be entered into GeoTracker, a state board database that is publicly accessible. There is the management practice implementation report for growers to report on practices implemented specifically to address management plans. And then there is a new data storage requirement which increases the data retention period from 5 to 10 years and requires data backup at a secure offsite location by an independent entity. So the East San Joaquin Coalition's general order was updated, like I said, last February. So they've been implementing the new requirements for a year. The tentative order timelines reflect this 1-year lag. For instance, the irrigation nitrogen management plan and irrigation nitrogen management plan summary report requirements start a year later for the other coalitions. Some of the elements are coordinated, like the development of the groundwater protection formula and the farm evaluation due date. And a few of the elements have greater than a 1-year lag, like the drinking water well monitoring requirement. So the goal of updating all of these coalition-based general orders at the same time is to achieve a more coordinated timeline for the program. One of the lessons learned from the initial adoption of the general orders is that having coalitions on very different timelines caused significant confusion and was really disruptive for the Irrigate Lands program. So I also want to highlight that existing timelines for 3 important groundwater protection elements are not proposed to be altered by this update. Those elements are the Management Practice Evaluation Program, the Groundwater Trend Monitoring Plans, and the Groundwater Quality Management Plans. Staff conducted significant outreach for this order update process. At our quarterly Irrigate Land stakeholder meetings with the coalitions, environmental justice representatives, and other interested parties, we've discussed the petition order regularly, and we've dedicated several meetings specifically to the discussion of petition order elements. Last summer, the affected coalitions were provided administrative drafts of their general orders, and then staff met with them to discuss their early comments. Last November, we released the tentative revised general orders with an extra long comment period at the request of the environmental justice representatives. And finally, we've had numerous conversations with commenters and other interested parties throughout the process. So the tentative orders were revised to add petition order elements, most of which were precedential. We also added new reopener language for CV Salts, reflecting that the Basin Plan amendments are working their way through the State Board and that we expect to be updating the Irrigate Lands general orders with those requirements in time. We also removed the notice of intent requirement for new coalition members to streamline the enrollment process. But I just want to emphasize and reiterate that the primary goal of the revisions is to include the elements from the petition order. We received 15 comment letters. 14 came from agricultural interests. 1 letter came jointly from the 3 environmental justice organizations that we work most closely with in the Irrigate Lands program. To summarize the comments, I would say the most significant agricultural concerns are the increasing program costs and complexity, and specifically the increasing monitoring and reporting requirements. Also, the agricultural commenters are frustrated that the Irrigate Lands program is not tailored for specific groups and that we don't seem to be able to recognize the unique characteristics of certain commodities. The environmental justice representatives, while supportive of some elements of the updated orders, also had a number of concerns. I would say that their most significant concerns are regarding drinking water safety and compliance with the anti-degradation and non-point source policies. So we received a number of comments asking for a review of the existing Irrigate Lands regulatory program, addressing elements unrelated to the petition order. For the Irrigate Lands program, we've set up a stepwise process in which the State Board's mandates in the petition order are addressed first. Updating the general orders to address the petition order and coordinate the coalition timelines is critical. Currently, there's an uneven regulatory landscape for agriculture in our region where the East San Joaquin Coalition and their members are required to do more than all the others. Once the general orders are updated, we can move to the important issues brought up by the commenters. Updating the general orders is the appropriate next step for the program. One priority issue staff plans to address next is evaluating how the program regulates irrigated pastures. Several commenters requested that the Irrigate Lands program be modified to recognize the unique characteristics of irrigated pastures, their low potential water quality threat, their potential environmental benefits, and their low economic value. Last fall, staff attended an upper watershed listening session with ranchers, the local ag commissioner, and representatives of NRCS, UC Cooperative Extension, and the Sacramento Valley Coalition. We discussed many of the issues brought up in the comment letters. And building off of that discussion, we're working with the UC Extension researchers, ranchers, and others to develop a conceptual approach for regulating irrigated pasture to bring as an information item to the October board meeting. Some commenters asked for an update of the irrigated lands economic analysis. In particular, we're asked to address the following: the new cost for growers to comply with the irrigated lands program, including the new petition order requirements, the cost to drinking water users affected by excess nitrates, and the cost of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, SGMA, and CV salts, since growers are affected by those programs as well. So an economic analysis was developed to support the initial adoption of the irrigated lands general orders. That analysis considered costs associated with implementing agricultural practices and providing clean drinking water. The petition order considered the additional costs of increased monitoring and reporting mandated by that order for coalitions and their members. SGMA is not implemented by the irrigated lands general orders, and so it's not necessary for us to consider those costs for this update. And any cost considerations needed for CV salts will be addressed when those requirements are incorporated into the irrigated lands general orders. Therefore, an updated economic analysis is not needed. The Sac Valley Coalition asked for an exemption from the requirement to develop a groundwater protection formula for nitrogen loading. The coalition reasoned that this specific approach is not mandated for them since they did not work with the other coalitions to propose this methodology. So the petition order mandated the groundwater protection formula for coalitions that proposed the methodology, along with those who have groundwater quality management plans within the Central Valley region. And the Sac Valley Coalition does have a groundwater quality management plan. Therefore, the groundwater protection formula requirement is appropriate for the Sac Valley Coalition. Several coalitions asked for more time to develop an approach for defining nitrogen outliers. So to align timelines, the tentative general orders initially had the same due dates for all coalitions to propose an outlier approach. In evaluating the comments, staff recognized that while the East San Joaquin Coalition is required to provide their outlier information this year, the other coalitions won't be required to do so until next year. And changing the due date for developing the approach doesn't change the outlier information submittal timeline. So staff changed the proposed due dates for proposing an outlier approach to the end of the year in the tentative general orders. The environmental justice representatives urged that we accelerate and expand the on-farm drinking water well monitoring effort by requiring all coalition members to monitor their on-farm drinking water wells by 2020, and where nitrate exceedances are found, by requiring growers not only to provide notice to drinkers of the affected well water, but to neighbors and nearby state small water systems, and finally by requiring monitoring of other constituents, such as 123 TCP and DBCP. So the on-farm drinking water well monitoring program, including the schedule, the constituent to be monitored, as well as the noticing requirements, are proposed to satisfy the petition order and to initiate the program. As the monitoring program progresses, we will evaluate if changes are needed and bring any recommendations back to the board. Since the on-farm drinking water well monitoring program is just getting started, we're literally at the beginning of our second month in implementing the program. We did not make any changes to the monitoring elements. The environmental justice representatives also expressed concerns about the use of drinking water treatment systems to satisfy the replacement water requirements. Specifically, they're concerned about the system having adequate nitrate treatment, being properly maintained, and the need for a disclaimer that the system might not adequately treat all constituents of concern. So for our agency, CV Salts represents the structured process for addressing drinking water needs and replacement water. The Central Valley Water Board has the authority to require replacement water, and of course, if replacement water is required, appropriate quality will be assured. The environmental justice representatives also questioned whether or not the tentative revised general orders comply with the anti-degradation policy. As required by the anti-degradation policy, we have properly assessed the baseline water quality for the Irrigated Lands Program. And the requirements of the Irrigated Lands General Orders represent best practicable treatment or control. So as upheld by the State Water Board in the petition order, these order updates comply with the anti-degradation policy. The environmental justice representatives also questioned the tentative general order's compliance with the non-point source policy. Specifically, they questioned whether the general orders contain time schedules and quantifiable milestones for meeting water quality objectives. The tentative general orders contain receiving water limits, which must be met unless there is an approved management plan. Management plans are required to have specific schedules and milestones of practices, tasks, and measurable goals. The schedule for compliance must be as short as practicable, but no later than 10 years. So for those reasons, the general order updates comply with the non-point source policy. In summary, the tentative revised Irrigated Lands General Orders implement the petition order mandates, require drinking water well monitoring and noticing, and include new requirements for groundwater protection. Staff recommends adoption of the resolution amending the 7 coalition-based Irrigated Lands General Orders. At this time, I would like to submit the presentation, the agenda materials, and associated files into the record. This concludes the presentation, and staff would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Sue, and those will be part of the record. Very good presentation, pretty clear. Any questions or comments by board members? If not, we will then proceed to the cards. First of all, I'll go with the Irrigated Lands Water Quality Coalition Group representatives. Do you wish to present?
Good morning, Chairman Longley and board members. My name is Donald Icamilla. I'm the Executive Director of the Cahuilla Basin Water Quality Association, 130 North Garden Street in Visalia, and I have taken the oath. So although we are not happy with the revisions, we accept them as proposed. It's been a long process with the state board. We all know that. It's been a good effort with working with regional board staff and the state board staff to get where we are. So we have about approximately 1,300 growers, about 160,000 irrigated acres, and over really the last 5 years, it's been a monumental effort to implement the order, and we are still in the early stages of what's called a long-term program. And our efforts moving forward on these revisions, there are some other things, as Sue McConnell presented, coming up. We have to implement all these revisions. There's a lot of changes with the paperwork and our database with the growers, additional workshops and outreach events. It's a lot of work. We have CV Salts coming up that influences this. We've had our groundwater quality connections with Sigma coming on board. And probably one of the biggest things is within Cahuilla and others, just our effort to provide replacement water through our kiosk program to disadvantaged communities. And that was on your website. It's a tremendous achievement, and our coalition is moving forward on that. That is going to be a lot of time and money to do that. So additionally, just implementing these revisions, we do plan to work very closely with Regional Board staff and ask that Regional Board staff, make sure that things that we do aren't adding additional burdens beyond what the intent was. So again, we accept the changes, not happy with them, but know we'll work together to make them successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? The fact you stated that you're not entirely happy with the revisions, but you're going to work with us, I appreciate that. We take that as a sign of cooperation that will help this go a long ways. Next card, Ricardo Ortega from Grasslands Water District.
Hello, Chair Longley, Board. Ricardo Ortega, General Manager, Grassland Water District, Resource Conservation District. I'm here representing 2,500 landowners as well as federal and state interests. We deliver fresh water up to state and federal wildlife refuges in the Grassland Ecological Area. It is, I take much pride in saying that it is the largest contiguous wetland in the western United States, really the last remaining that we have in the West. We're doing a lot. We've worked with the board closely over the years. We've developed the largest real-time water quality monitoring network in the western states. We are monitoring salts and flow, loading back to the lower San Joaquin. We coordinate with our stakeholder partners in the ag interests to ensure that we're meeting the objectives at Vernalis and at the Merced River confluence. I'm here today to say that cost of doing business is exceedingly expensive. We are charged about $1.50 an acre. That's a huge cost for such an expansive wetland complex that really is the kidneys of society. We're stripping nitrogen from the system. We're managing our salts. We're replenishing groundwater aquifers. We're providing fresh drinking water to these rural disadvantaged communities. We're doing all the monitoring ourselves. And so very little of the fee actually goes to the Coalition for monitoring purposes. It is actually predominantly going to the State Board administrative pass-through, which is overly burdensome. So we're doing great things out there. We hope for a little relief. We hope for the support of the Regional Board in advocating that maybe some relief is necessary and appropriate. We would like to reconvene the Wetlands Working Group. We had good communication for some time, trying to best characterize and develop a strategy for us to continue to be successful. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Thank you. The card from your counsel, Ellen Weir.
If I could have a comment on that. I think that as you heard kind of in Sue's presentation, we've taken the policy position really to deal with this iteration of the revisions to the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program as really strictly implementing the mandates of the East San Joaquin petition. That means that it will be an obligation of the board and the Irrigated Lands staff to address those issues related to, say, some of the upper watershed concerns about the equity issues involved in the program and the wetlands issues. I think that wetlands managers have come to us for years saying we don't have a great fit in the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program. It costs us a heck of a lot, and we're kind of providing, in many respects, more benefits than we are detrimental effects on water quality. We're different than the Irrigated Lands Program. We hopped aboard this program when this program was a surface water only program, and now that it is both a groundwater and surface water program, we're asking you to look at this a little differently. So I think in Sue's presentation is the commitment to say, as long as we're doing the East San Joaquin alone and this round of modifications to the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, that means that the next round will be a consideration of bigger changes to the program, specifically with respect to potentially wetlands and potentially upland areas and potentially other lower value crop types throughout the Central Valley. So we're essentially saying we'll make the limited policy decisions here today, and then the broader discussion will happen at some point in the future.
I have another question, couple questions, Carl, if you
Sure,
could
go
come
ahead.
back to the mic, please.
Right, go ahead.
You mentioned being the largest wetland, and you mentioned $1.50 an acre, and I'm curious how many acres we're talking about.
So we pay on about 50,000 acres. That is, we were able to negotiate just the wetland footprint itself and not the associated habitats. So there's a lot of upland, there's a lot of sort of wildlife friendly landscape rangeland, that type of thing. So
we've kind of defined the what it is, but I'm curious just to talk a little bit about really what it is in terms of being a wetland and what that means.
So we are intensively managed. We try and mimic historic hydro periods. We provide overwintering habitat for migratory waterfowl predominantly, but 300
What kind
species.
of waterfowl are you talking about?
All waterfowl. So the
I'm
single
looking for
largest.
names.
Our local breeding birds are gadwall and mallard. We've dozens of species of ducks and geese, 300 species of bird. The diversity is sort of unmatched in the West. So
What kind of, do you get like river otter and?
we do have river otter. We do have mink and all the mesocarnivore. We've got cougar. We've got elk. We've got deer.
Are those tule elk?
They are tule elk, the smallest of the elk. That's right.
So I think painting that picture is important, so thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen, your turn.
Thank you. I'll try not to take too much more of your time. I know you have an important decision ahead, but I did want to reinforce that we're encouraged to hear that staff is willing to work with us on creating a new regulatory strategy for managed wetlands.
Just a second. If you would state your name and have you taken the
Sure.
oath?
My name is Ellen Weir, Council for Grassland Water District, and I hereby take the oath that what I say here is true. I'm not sure I have taken the oath. I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll accept that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have brought a Grasslands passport for each of you with a little bit more information about our area, so consider yourself formally invited to come visit us. If you'd like to learn more about managed wetlands in the Central Valley, I would highly encourage you to do a Google search for a recent article published by Professor Cynthia Hooper last month. It's called "The Land Where Birds Are Grown," and there's a great article with videos of the refuge areas down there in the Central Valley. We provide critical wildlife habitat, as my general manager just discussed. We also recharge groundwater for local rural communities that are groundwater dependent for their drinking water, and we provide natural water quality improvement through biofiltration of wetland plants. We do not use fertilizers or other inputs. And our landowners, including private duck clubs, state wildlife areas, and national wildlife refuges, are not in this managed wetlands business for any sort of profit. We operate the largest real-time data management program, as my manager described, and we're a designated mitigation area under federal law. Most of the vast majority of lands within our district are under permanent habitat conservation easement. So that's the good stuff, and now I'm going on to the wonky stuff. Our wetlands are managed, as was mentioned, as irrigated lands, so we pay fees. Our landowners have to develop plans. We participate in the third-party group, and frankly, it's a lot for our habitat areas that are not in the farming business. Our wetlands will also now be regulated under the state's proposed wetlands policy for dredge and fill requirements. And we are one of those tricky areas that is still working with staff at the state board, trying to figure out how we fit under that new policy. In 2016, this board issued Resolution 2016-0064, and it's a pretty good read. It ends by stating that the Central Valley Board directs staff to work with stakeholders to develop an appropriate type of regulatory strategy for protecting surface and groundwater quality as it relates to managed wetlands discharges. And it states that the consideration should include goals to increase managed wetlands and water quality benefits and minimize regulatory costs. So after you get through this decision today, we would really like for the board and staff to reinitiate that effort with the Managed Wetlands Group. The timing is ripe right now with the new policy coming on board with the state to develop a new regulatory strategy for managed wetlands in the Central Valley. So we're just here to ask that you jumpstart that Managed Wetlands Working Group and help us develop a smarter strategy for managed wetlands regulation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Carl, I just want to broaden that picture a little bit. I mean, we're talking about grasslands, and it's particularly important. And we have the Sacramento Wildlife Refuge, or we have, other managed wetlands that are federally, state, or locally owned. Also, we have a lot of private landowners and a lot of agriculture, particularly the rice industry, but a lot of other agriculture throughout the valley that is an important component of this wetland habitat and what that is. And there's not so much of it left anymore. And it's that collaborative partnership between public entities and private entities, I think, that really goes a long ways in this region to providing the remnant of habitat that's critically important to the Pacific flyway and other species that exist here. So it's a big issue, and I'm looking forward to it coming back.
And certainly I would ask the executive officer to keep us up to date on what the state board is doing and what that does vis-a-vis this. I'm sympathetic towards, and I think we need, personally, my own personal view, we need to look at a different coalition, a different program, different something for the managed wetlands, and what that is, I don't know. But I would suggest that, I think it's a good recommendation that we would encourage the reconvening of the Wetland Working Group that has been there in the past. With that said, we still need to know what's coming out of the wetlands. There can be very high levels of coliform and other enteric organisms at certain times of the year. My experience comes on that, not from here, but on Chesapeake Bay. And I do know that geese can pass an awful lot of material through their body in a day, in a period of a day. So how we balance this, how we put this together, I think is critical.
Absolutely. No, I'm hearing it loud and clear. Frankly, I worked quite a bit on that resolution, so I'm glad it's a good read. But I think when we had those meetings, and Susan was down and played an instrumental role in talking with some of the wetlands managers and getting a meeting of the board down in the wetlands to discuss some of these issues. To be quite frank, some of those issues were derailed by the East San Joaquin petition. It was shortly on the heels of those issues that intensive negotiations around what the East San Joaquin petition was going to impose as statewide mandates on the irrigated lands regulatory programs picked up in earnest. Those were diverted a heck of a lot of staff time into figuring those out and working with not just environmental justice communities, but growers to figure out what the future course was of the statewide program. I think, again, I think I really want to thank the wetlands managers for sticking with it, not that they had that much of a choice, but sticking with it as we went through that iteration, as we go through the iteration that's in front of the board today. And you have my commitment and the commitment of my staff to continue to work on this issue and look for solutions. I think one of the things that comes through in that resolution, just for what it's worth, is that we heard, particularly during the drought, when water prices were spiking and when you saw the effects of increased regulation from the regional board resulting in much higher dollar figures for dollars per acre. You had wetlands managers make the tough decision, I'm not going to flood my acreage this year because I can't afford the regulatory burden. I can't afford to both pay my permit fees and to buy the water that I need to grow birds this year. And I think that is a very, very tough issue for this board to wrestle with. I don't want to be the one that is essentially saying, because our regulatory requirements are too high, you can't flood that acreage, you can't provide what is groundwater recharge for disadvantaged communities within that area, and you can't provide critical habitat to replace lots of acreage that we've lost in the past. Those types of policy discussions I want to tee up for the board in the next year, couple years, to see if we can chart a path forward. Because like I said, the wetlands are in this program because they became a part of this program when it was a surface water only program. And it is important to monitor what comes off of the wetlands with respect to surface water. I think there's a lot of room for discussion about what the appropriate groundwater requirements are and balancing those interests, just like the board chair said.
Well, you're correct. Also, not one size fits all on this. In the Tulare Lake Basin, we have one wetland, if I'm not mistaken, that uses pumped water for flooding. So
there's a few, yeah.
There's all kinds of different issues that have to be addressed.
And I appreciate that comment, Dr. Longley, and I appreciate the commitment from staff, because in preparing for this item and talking with staff, there are some not, one size fits all. There are properties that are just different than maybe what the meat of this program is supposed to be. And so the fact that we're not going to let that fall off the radar, and that we're going to push to make sure that the programs that are in fit the idea of what this program is, and the ones that are like wetlands or irrigated pasture and things like that are considered maybe separately.
And I was going to say, we were planning on doing that in 2012. The petition and the fact that it took a little while delayed that, and I think it's high time for that type of reconsideration.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next card for David Corey. It's always necessary to listen to what David has to say.
Chair Longley, members of the board, David Corey representing the San Joaquin Valley Drainage Authority, the West Side San Joaquin River Watershed Coalition. Really, I don't have a whole lot to say, Carl.
Well, you put if necessary down here.
I did, but I figured I'd get up, and I just want to thank staff for working through the process of making these modifications to the WDRs that the state board mandated were put on ours. I think the process worked very well to make sure we had the give and take and dialogue, and making sure that this fit within the orders, and we had the opportunity to be heard. I think we came out with something. We don't agree with all of the things, as Donald said, that the state board modified in those orders. We think we probably could have done something better if we just kept it within this board, but that's the past, and we're not relitigating what they did in the past. We're going to work hard to implement what they did and appreciate the staff's time to put those into the orders, and let's kind of move on and do the hard work, because arguing about what's going to be in the orders is really easy. Actually doing the work that they set us on that course is really hard. So that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you once again, David. I have a card for Jennifer Spalletta, San Joaquin County RCD.
Good morning. Jennifer Spalletta from Spalletta Law. I represent San Joaquin County RCD. The RCD operates the Coalition for the San Joaquin County and Delta watershed area. I also want to thank staff for working with the coalition over the last several years on the development of the WDRs. I will tell you that our board and our landowners are also not thrilled with the contents of the order. There were some hard-fought negotiations, but I will also tell you that it is somewhat refreshing to see the communications come much closer together with this particular order. I think we used to show up at these hearings with a lot of people on both sides of the issue that were often talking past each other. One side of the room was explaining how bad the problem was. The other side of the room was preoccupied with saying it wasn't all their fault. I think what happens with this current order is we've set up a process to actually do what David called the hard work, the very hard, expensive work of identifying where the problems are and how they can be solved. And that's in the groundwater protection formula and targets. And so while we're not happy with having to spend the money and do all the work, I think we are satisfied that we're bridging a gap that existed before and moving the ball forward. And frankly, we're on the cutting edge of technology and research, which is very exciting. So we thank staff again for their efforts.
Thank you very much. The next card is from Jeffrey from the California Department of Food and California Department of, Fish and Wildlife. Is it Shu is your last name? Yes, it is. I didn't know whether that was an R or a U, so
Sorry about
excuse me.
that.
Excuse me.
Apologize for my handwriting.
Well, it beats mine, so that's.
Again, thank you, Chair Longley, members of the board. My name is Jeffrey Shu. I'm with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I'm not here to exactly directly comment on the order that's being adopted or proposed to be adopted today. But again, to echo the comments of Grasslands, is that we'd like to be interested in reconvening the Managed Wetland Stakeholder Group that was instrumental in helping to meet with board staff in implementing some changes to the current irrigated lands regulatory order. This wetland work group had met from 2013 to 2015, and we were able to propose a regulatory framework based on costs, water quality monitoring, protection of wetland resources, and recognition of state and federal mandates for wetlands. Board actions to date have resulted in wetland-specific templates for reporting water use, the Tulare Basin exemption, and removal of requirements for nitrogen and sediment reporting. Further work with this wetland work group was suspended when, of course, the petition came out, and as Executive Officer Balupa has mentioned. But we're really eager to kind of, after today, get back into it and perhaps go back to the staff proposed options of perhaps doing some low threat orders or exemptions when appropriate. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today, and really appreciate the comments from Chair Longley, board members Schneider and Ramirez. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I suspect if we're going to start this thing again at some point, we might want to poll the board members and determine who would like to participate at one of our so-called committees.
You know, it's absolutely something that we could do at the end of this item during deliberations if you wanted to solicit volunteers.
Sure.
Board looks a little different than it did in 2015, so we might have some new voices.
Great. Mike Claiborne for the Leadership Council.
Good morning. I'm Mike Claiborne. I'm an attorney with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. Thank you for your time this morning. And I'd also like to start with thank you to staff for reaching out to discuss our comment letter. We had a good phone call that I think narrowed the issues and provided some clarity around specifically timelines and some other things. But we really appreciate how easy it is to deal with regional board staff and the fact that you all reached out to talk to us before this hearing. So thank you for that. Second, we appreciate the clarity in response to comments and over the phone to our questions regarding timelines for implementation of this program and whether this update modified the timelines for submitting groundwater quality management plans and compliance with water quality objectives. And also the fact that that clarification was this didn't alter those timelines. So thank you for that clarity. We do still believe that there's room for the regional board to expand the on-farm domestic well testing requirements, and specifically the recommendation from the state board that you look at other contaminants that could be present and notify nearby domestic well users. I think that's critical. I know there's some efforts in other programs such as CV salts that may address these concerns, but there's no need to put that off. And then finally, I just wanted to comment on the anti-degradation policy and the analysis that was not updated during these amendments. We think that those anti-degradation analyses really need to be updated. There's been a lot of new data collected and new understanding developed since these orders were issued, and we think that triggers a new anti-deg analysis. And also wanted to get more clarity on what the response from the regional board would be if the anti-degradation analysis supporting the East San Joaquin order ultimately doesn't withstand judicial scrutiny. We think that because all of the anti-degradation analyses are essentially identical, if that analysis didn't withstand scrutiny, neither would this one. So just wondering what the response would be. Thanks.
And I'll let Jessica opine a little bit more, but as somebody who has a little bit of experience working with this, I first want to say, Mike, I do appreciate the comments, and I do appreciate you and your group's participation in not just the negotiations in front of the regional board, but also in the negotiations in front of the state board in terms of what the requirements were. I think there was a lot of give and take on both sides, a lot of uncomfortable negotiations. And even the regional board, I think you heard the growers come in and say that, well, they're not entirely happy with how the order shook out, but I think other regulatory agencies could voice the same opinion. We'll reserve whether this board wants to say that or not, but there are plenty of voices saying we're not entirely happy with what we got, but let's do it, let's move forward. And I think the ideas that are in your comment letter with respect to additional drinking water contaminant sampling and additional notification are ideas that we should be tackling as a state. Again, it is our policy position that maybe not this go around of the irrigated lands orders, but certainly something that we want to discuss both in front of the state board, in front of this board, and in front of the regulated community about where the resources are going to come from, how those notices are going to be applied, and what compliance of CV salts means, whether that's going to be included in the bundle of things that need to be done. With respect to the anti-degradation analysis, I think I'll let Jessica weigh in on this, but I think the state board charted a position for us, and it's consistent with what this order goes in. And just like many other controversies where there is something simmering below the surface that's been simmering for many years about whether you're doing this right or this wrong under policy, we're going to take our cues from the state board and whether the state board says we've done things correctly until that course of action is found inadequate by the courts, at which point, we do have to do a heck of a lot of scrambling to reassess where our regulatory programs are. But I think at the current juncture, we're going to move forward because, again, what we're doing is consistent with what the state board has said under the East San Joaquin, and we have to abide by that. But I'll let Jessica kind of voice that too, because she's been looking into that issue quite a bit. Thank you.
So I have looked significantly at the issue, and as Mr. Blupa has stated, the state board order did uphold Eastern San Joaquin's anti-degradation analysis, and that is fairly similar to this analysis. So if a court decision did hold that it was inadequate in some ways, we would need to take a very serious look at these orders and determine whether they are similarly inadequate or what changes would need to be made.
I appreciate that clarification, and I'd also add that there are some really good things in these amendments, including the groundwater, township level groundwater protection targets. We're glad that those are being implemented quickly. So thank you for both the response and for that.
Thank you very much.
Carl?
Yeah.
Yes.
I do just want to reiterate the policies and the directions about how we move forward are the purview of this board. And I personally support what Patrick says, but I do want to emphasize that this is a board direction and decision. That's why we're here. So I don't want to lean it on our staff. It's up to us. So thank you.
It's their responsibility to come to us with these issues. I fully agree, Bob.
Dr. Longley, I'd like just to make 3 comments on the speaker, on Mike that just sat down. First, and this is true not just for his comments, but just overall, I want to tell staff that I can tell that this is not an easy conversation to have and an easy conversation to reach out on. But the fact that you do it and develop the trust is really a big deal. I mean, we hear about trust, lack of trust with other organizations, and the fact that here we consistently hear about the effort to reach out really makes our job easier because we feel more confident in the information that we get. We get, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that's what we're here for, right? That's our job. So I want to appreciate staff's work and make what's probably an uncomfortable conversation at times. So I appreciate that. Second, I do appreciate Mike's request to maybe whether or not we would, you know, whether we're doing enough at this level. And I think that my response is probably going to be similar to the considerations that I had when, you know, we're asking to consider whether we should, you know, narrow the scope of what's before us today or whether we should expand the scope. And, you know, the way that I see it is that what we're here is to kind of in some way level the playing field, right? If the East San Joaquin Coalition has been doing this for a year and maybe they're at a disadvantage and have been at a disadvantage for a year, then, you know, we need to consider that because they are our neighbors. The other thing is that we're not, you know, I'm not inclined to expand the scope at this time either. So just the way I'm not going to be inclined to, based on what I've read, I mean, I'm still going to consider testimony, but to either expand or contract what's before us, I feel like I need to be fair just to everyone in the room and just say, you know, we've essentially been given a timeline and order by the state board on a petition that we did our best on. You know, the program that we put together with your help was our best shot, and we did our best, and we try to be honest. And if we get directed, then just the way, you know, when the court directs me, I do what the court says, and we do it under the time frame that they give us. So I appreciate the considerations. This is probably not going to be the time where we add a lot to the order, and then you know, I think there will be, you know, time for changes because CV SALT is going to modify this program. We've got Sigma that's going to probably modify this program. We've also got commitments that we were going to review this program at a certain interval that's going to change things. So, you know, I appreciate the fact that maybe some sides think we don't go far enough at this time, and probably the other sides think we're going too far. But anyways, I guess I've rambled on long enough, but I want to thank staff for sure for doing the hard work.
Thank you. Tess Dunham? Oh, go ahead, Ricky.
That's okay. No, I just wanted to comment on the Environmental Justice Group and their comments. While the coalitions, they have funding to work with compliance, and it's a challenge, but they come to the table. But in the disadvantaged communities, we don't have that representation. So to have the EJ groups represent the bodies that do not have the resources to come out and lift their voices, I appreciate what you do and bringing it to the forefront of the issues that are impacting the disadvantaged communities. And I also want to thank staff and the coalitions, because with all these issues that come forth, you had to get in a room and fight it out to come to a conclusion that's going to be beneficial to address the safe drinking water quality that is important to all Californians. So I appreciate the work, and you know, at this point, we're dealing with this particular issue. CV SALT is an opportunity down the road to address some of the issues, but the fact that the coalitions can come together and we come to a conclusion to address the issues that are before us is commendable for the work of the staff, the coalitions, and our EJ groups, because you're at the table, and we would not be able to move forward if you weren't at the table to bring something to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Tess, you want to go ahead?
Sure, thank you. Tess Dunham, SOMAC Simmons and Dunn, here today representing the California Rice Commission Tim and Roberta send their regrets for not being able to be here in person. They're on their way back from Washington, D.C. And in fact, they will let you know how well your webcast is working. I was receiving text. I believe they're sitting in an airport watching the webcast right now. So we'll
Did
let
they
you
say
know.
anything about how nice I look? Did they say anything?
They said you all looked fabulous,
Oh,
darling.
well, that's not as good as just me, but that's pretty good.
Yeah. So thank you. And on behalf of the Rice Commission, we also want to thank staff again for an extraordinary job and just the process of reaching out and working with all the various stakeholders. We very much, on behalf of the Rice Commission, appreciate putting up front that the Rice Commission order is slightly different than the others based upon the State Water Board's determinations that we in Rice have been able to show that we do not have impacts with respect to nitrates and therefore have received special dispensation under the State Board order, that not all of those precedential requirements apply to the California Rice Commission and our members within our coalition. And we appreciate that the order that is before you today that is specific to Rice reflects that. And also some of the other provisions within the order that did not pertain particularly well to the Rice order, and we were able to work out with staff to get those represented and adjusted. And so we just thank you all today. We are in support of having the Rice order adopted as it's been presented by staff. Thank you.
Any questions for Tess? Thank you very much. At this point, I have no more cards. Bruce, I don't have a card from you. I honestly
I think
don't.
that's the one you threw under the desk, Dr. Long.
I wouldn't do that to Bruce.
You know, we in agriculture.
Oh, the vice chair found it.
You know what? Have you already? Bruce Hadelschelt, Northern California Water Association, on behalf of the Sacramento Valley Water Quality Coalition. Have you already selected your chairman for the year? Because I could comment on that. Anyway, in all seriousness, the accolades for staff are deserved, but they're missing one thing. Those of you who traveled to Fall River in 2017 and took the tour, very much appreciate it. Those of you who traveled to, well, we didn't have you in the Upper Feather River last October, but it continued. When you traveled to Fall River, you gave staff direction, and you saw the difference between the valley floor and the upper watersheds, and that's reflected in the comments you hear today. So I want to recognize your commitment and ask you to continue that commitment. As I was driving over, I understand the State Board will be in Reading on May 6th and 7th, so I'll chat with Tam and see if we can't get them in their busy schedule to slide up a little ways up to MacArthur and the beautiful valleys of the Pitt River system. We've got to get you up there sometime. It's gorgeous. You may never ever come back to 300 feet elevation and that.
When you look at Shasta and Lassen from the east, they look even bigger.
My God, it's gorgeous. Thank you, Chairman Longley, for those comments. The other thing I think is important, and Vice Chairman Cadera recognized it. You know, we're one discharger, but the real action here and the real delineation here is in what we're all working, the environmental justice community, the discharge community. Chair Longley, your executive officer before committing hours twice a month to a salt and nitrate basin plan amendment that really characterizes and delineates where the issues are and how they should be approached and how they should be managed. So we appreciate that recognition. We know that there's a very narrow scope to what's before you today, but some of you truly see the bigger picture, and the solution lies not just in making sure agriculture is doing their job, but making sure the POTWs, the food processors, and others are doing theirs. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you for your contribution to the process. This time, I truly have no more cards, I believe, and we will have a closing statement by staff? That's it, huh?
I'd like to ask one question. It seems like there's anticipated modifications to these orders down the road, either for wetlands management, uplands areas, so on. So I'm a little curious how the triggering events in the current order will be managed to accommodate changes so that reporting requirements aren't enforced prior to potential changes down the road, and how does the staff manage that kind of an issue?
I think I might have an answer for that one. I think a lot of the requirements in this order go to the nitrogen reporting and the irrigation reporting requirements. Some of those fundamental issues are not going to change too much in the next iteration of these orders. Some will, but fundamentally, what these orders allow is basically not just in a coalition growers to work together, but across coalitions, folks can work together to develop groundwater protection strategies and develop reporting tools and things of that nature. Those will still prove useful in the next iteration of general orders when we go to amend these, not just for wetlands and not just for low threat areas, but also for CV salts to incorporate those strategies into those orders. So the tools that are under development are not going to be tools that will be wasted at some point in the future. And the deadlines, I think, we've taken a hard look at the general orders to make sure that, even within the coalition areas, all these tools will still be needed by the coalitions. It's just a question of how they will be deployed, who will be in and who will be, kind of using those tools to a great degree, and who could actually use those tools to kind of set aside requirements and move them into the future. So I think that's kind of where we are. We're still at the cusp, putting in a lot of the elements that will be required into the future. It's really just the intensity with which those will be used.
And in the past, probably most of our regulation by this board, if you will, has been on folks who have, for one reason or another, not joined the coalition. And we've gotten feedback from the coalitions. In fact, I got chewed out by one coalition for the fact that this board was not being more aggressive on working on getting folks into the coalition. A lot of good folks out there working hard to make this thing work, and they're putting their dollars on the line. And if their neighbor is not participating, that's not right. So that's where I think a good part of our effort has been in the past. Obviously, a lot of work has been going on in the coalitions on identifying problems, solving those problems. That's come out of the data collection. And it's been very heartwarming to see that happen. So a lot of stuff is going on. I'm sure it's going to continue to go on. All of it's focused on improving water quality, but we've had other goals put on to us, and as we put these into the mix, how they change, how they're implemented, there's a whole lot of questions to answer at this point and progress to be made yet.
Just in a little bit more response, this project of trying to, tailor the program a little bit better for these other discharges, it's kind of been ongoing. As some of the commenters said, we've already reduced or removed some of the nutrient management requirements. And we, staff is certainly, where there is something that needs to be adjusted ahead of a full update, we're certainly willing to work with folks on that too, to make sure that we're not doing something that doesn't make sense.
Thank you for all that clarification. I guess, given that a lot of the speakers were unhappy but agreeable to moving forward, it seems like we might be in the sweet spot here. So appreciate everybody's efforts and hard work ahead too. Thank you.
And I'd like to add that we've heard a lot from the speakers and from staff on wetlands, upland areas, difference between commodities and regions insofar as applicability of the program. And those are all things that, and other issues having to do with the drinking water program and so forth. Those are all good issues, important issues that we have to look at. But one of the things I found, between the good, the bad, and the ugly, very good, was hearing and it seemed to run through many of the presentations, that they felt that staff communication was very good, and there was an awful lot of accolades to that. That's good feedback to that. We like to hear that. We know we have a great staff. It's just nice to hear that they're great. So with that, are there any other comments?
I'll play on that. Yeah, I cop to the fact that we have to make the hard decisions on policy and other stuff. Those are board decisions. And the other thing I think this board has consistently done is to encourage staff to reach out to all of the various communities, whether they're ag or wastewater treatment plants or the environmental justice community, social justice. And as Carl says, it is really pretty awesome to hear back that this process is effective, gets the work done, and people don't always like the decisions. One of the coalitions said, we don't really like everything in here, but we're going to get to work on it. And I think the critical component is that people do feel heard in this process and understand the process. And thank you all, Patrick and your staff, for making that happen. And then I have some other comments on the monitoring of other constituents. And, this sounds like a really pretty reasonable question for me. And my understanding now is this is going to come back in the not too distant future, and we will look at this, and that we are committed to looking at that. And again, this is a health and safety issue. It's drinking water quality for people that can't otherwise know what is in their water. So I just want to call attention to that. I'm going to support what we have here now, but I do want to see maybe that, and I understand the reasons we're not doing now, but let's keep that in mind, please.
Thank you. Any further comments?
I'll make a comment. I'd like to turn attention to the master responses to all of the letters. I think it's very clear that the executive officer manages our day-to-day operations, and I want to emphasize that if you got a complaint, make a very clear argument to the executive officer. Staff is very cooperative in helping you solve your problems and deal with difficulties, but if you want to really have exception rather than complaining, you got to have a compelling argument in writing for the executive officer to evaluate, and then he comes back to us, for a major decision. And if you're not satisfied with the executive officer, that's what the 3 minutes are for, is to come directly to the board at one of our 6 meetings a year.
Thank you. Any further comments? Then I think we're ready for a recommendation by the executive officer.
Yeah, no, my recommendation would be to adopt the orders as proposed. I don't believe that there are any late revisions to those orders. They're not. And I do want to reemphasize our commitment to going back and revisiting and re-engaging on the issues that we discussed here today. And after the vote, should the board be inclined, we could take volunteers to reconvene a work group of the board, which would be 2 board members, to work on some of the wetlands issues specifically, the ones that we were talking about back in 2015, 2016.
Very good, thank you. Well, I'll close the hearing, and are there any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, please call the roll.
So I'd like to make the motion to approve the.
Thank you for giving me a moment. Hey, man, I'm moving this meeting along.
I see that.
Thank you, Carmen.
I move that we adopt the order to amend the ILRP waste discharge requirements as presented.
I'll second that.
Carmen's moved. Raji has seconded. Please call the roll.
Ms. Ramirez?
Yes.
Ms. Brower?
Yes.
Mr. Bradford?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider? Dr. Markham?
Aye.
Ms. Kadara?
Yes.
Dr. Longley?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, and thank you for saving me from some embarrassment, Carmen. Too late. Okay. So let's talk about wetlands and a volunteers, if you will, board members that would be interested in conferring with staff on this issue. Bob, do you have a
You know-
particular interest in that area?
I'm just kind of stacked up right now.
You know, Dr. Longley, I'd be happy to engage. You know, because a lot of that is in Merced County, I travel through there, I see it, I know it, I think it's localized for me, so I'd be happy to engage.
Mark tells me that he would be interested also.
Yeah, I'd be happy to participate in that.
So we have a 2-member group.
Sounds good to me. We will be, after the dust settles and we get these orders issued in the next couple weeks, we'll be feeling you out for good times to engage and give you some briefings, give you some background, and let us, and Sue and Susan will be charting the course forward and use you as a resource.
So we'll be recessing for lunch. During lunch, will we be discussing anything in closed session?
A number of matters. I'll turn to Jessica.
And I'm actually going to, I believe, David Lancaster, you have a number of items. Can you state your items?
Yeah, we'll be discussing closed session agenda items H and I, that is Grass Valley neighbors and Merced citizens, and as well as an update on agenda item M, the Greener Globe landfill matter. Additionally, Bailey Top Dupuy will be providing an update as well.
And that, the additional item is item F on the closed session agenda. That's Malaga.
And additionally, there will be also an update on the agenda item. One moment while I find it. There we go. Oh, that would be the agenda item L. That would be the Orland Sand and Gravel Facility.
Is there anything, is that it, or are there any other items?
Do you want more?
Not really, but I don't want to be surprised.
That's it.
That's it. Very good. Okay, we'll attempt to be back in here at 1 o'clock. Tentatively, we will come out of recess here at 1 o'clock.